when the act of delivering a package almost becomes a death sentence. This is the story of D'Monterrio Gibson. D'Monterrio was 24 years old and working as a driver for FedEx in Brookhaven, Mississippi. On January 24, 2022, D'Monterrio Gibson was doing his job, working for FedEx. FedEx routinely rents vehicles from Hertz for their drivers, and on this particular day, Gibson was provided with a vehicle that did not have the customary FedEx markings, but rather the Hertz logo on 3 sides. Despite this, Gibson was dressed in the full standard FedEx uniform. He had a delivery to 417 Junior Trail. He accidentally entered 427 Junior Trail into the system. Gets there, he's looking for the house, and he can't find it because it doesn't exist. So he goes back to his truck and realizes he needs 417 and not 427. He notices a mailbox with the house number on it and realizes where he needs to go. He goes to the house. No one answers. He leaves the package, gets back in his truck so that he can continue his route, and as he's about to leave the driveway, he's confronted by a pickup truck driven by Gregory Case. Gregory Case lives on Junior Trail, as does his son Brandon. Gregory Case drives his pickup truck across the lawn, honking his horn and cutting Mr. Gibson off in an effort to block him in so he's unable to leave the driveway. D'Monterrio's instincts kick in and he manages to swerve around the pickup truck, and he's now on the road. Once he gets 2 to 3 houses down, Brandon Case is standing in the middle of the road, mouthing and gesturing for him to stop, and he's pointing a gun right at him. Here's a clip of Mr. Gibson detailing what happened.
There's another guy standing in the middle of the street, pointing a gun in my vehicle just like this, motioning me to stop, saying, like, mouthing the word stop, as well as doing his hand like this. I shake my head no. I hide behind the steering wheel in hopes that he doesn't fire his weapon into my vehicle, and I swerve around him as well. Once I swerve around him, he starts actually firing shots to my vehicle. I heard about 4 or 5 shots, but we found more bullet holes.
Gibson doesn't stop. Do you blame him? I mean, I wouldn't stop, would you? Look at what happened to Ahmaud Arbery when he was chased down by white men in pickup trucks. He was brutally murdered by a shotgun blast to the chest. And you know what he was doing? He was jogging. Jogging. That's a tragic tale that we will visit at a later time. Mr. Gibson ducks behind the steering wheel trying to get away and manages to maneuver around Brandon Case. And when he does that, shots are fired. Remarkably, one of the 7 bullets fired struck a package that was directly behind Mr. Gibson, narrowly missing him. He came within an inch of losing his life. And for what? Seriously, for what? Amidst the gunfire, Gibson's manager from FedEx calls and hears the gunshots. D'Monterrio tells her that he's being shot at, and she replied with, "Get back to the station as soon as you can." She doesn't ask him, "Are you hurt?" She doesn't ask him, "Do you want me to call the police?" She doesn't ask him anything. She simply instructs him to return to the station. D'Monterrio arrived at Junior Trail at 7:22 p.m. The call from his manager came in at 7:27 p.m. This whole ordeal took all but 5 minutes. He nearly lost his life within 5 minutes of arriving, looking for the house, delivering the package, and getting back into his vehicle to continue his shift. His escape was a narrow one, and the account left him traumatized. Mr. Gibson is attempting to escape while the 2 men pursue him in their pickup truck. It is only when he gets to the interstate that he's able to elude them. Upon returning to the station, he and his manager assessed the damage to the vehicle. Gibson informed another manager of his intention to file a police report. The manager tells him they'll go in the morning and that they would accompany him. FedEx advises him not to speak to the media. Mr. Gibson felt uneasy about not reporting the incident right away, so he contacted the police. As he's trying to relay the incident, the officer cuts him off and says, "Save your story. I'll give your name and number to my supervisor." The officer then asked him, "Were you at 417 Junior Trail?" And he says, "Yes." And the cop says, "Well, we got a suspicious person call for that address." To which Mr. Gibson replies, "Sir, I'm not a suspicious person. I'm a FedEx driver and I was doing my job." He then tells the officer that he was shot at, and the cop says, "They didn't tell me that." Why is there this tendency for Black victims to be treated as if they are the perpetrators? Had he not gotten away, he would have been murdered and become another hashtag. The disturbing reality is that routine activities for white people can become extremely dangerous or life-threatening for Black people. Sadly, we've seen far too many instances where countless lives have been cut short due to systemic biases, with victims being murdered for no reason other than simply being Black while engaging in everyday activities like we all do. Every single day of their lives becomes a matter of survival. The following morning, D'Monterrio attends the police station with his manager. Here's a clip of Gibson discussing his visit to the police station.
The following morning, I had to go to the police station with a different manager. We filed a report. When I got to the police station, the police were not taking me serious at all. I dealt with 3 officers. The first officer I dealt with, he had to take my statement down. So as I'm telling him what's going on, he changed my story about 3 or 4 times. I would say to him, like, this is what happened. And he'd be like, so this is what you're saying happened? No, sir, this is what happened. We did that about 3 or 4 times before he finally got the statement right. After that, there was a second officer who was sitting there listening to me the whole conversation. And he made a comment. He said, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second and ask you if you did anything to make them think you were suspicious, to which I replied, no, sir, I was just doing my job. They thought I was suspicious. That was on them. And like I keep saying, this disrespect. Like, why would you even question me when I'm just simply out here doing my job? I'm the victim.
Again, this man was just doing his job. He delivered a package. It wasn't like he was climbing out of a window carrying a TV or something. And even if he was, legally, they did not have the right to shoot at him. Like, come on. Talk about adding insult to injury. Mr. Gibson is the victim here. The Brookhaven police tell him not to speak to the media. After providing this statement, Brookhaven police detective Vincent Fernando takes Gibson to a Honda dealership where Brandon Case is employed. Fernando goes in to speak to Brandon while he has Gibson wait in the car. Perhaps he wanted Gibson to identify him? I'm not quite sure. Anyway, he then takes Gibson to the actual location of where the incident occurred and asks Gibson to help him look for bullet fragments.
When have you ever heard of a situation where a victim of a crime is asked to help pull up the bullet fragments in which tried to attempt to take his life? That is insanity.
It just seems like everything about this case is bizarre, from what occurred to how it's being handled. Mr. Gibson is now scheduled to go to work. This is the very next day, the day after he almost lost his life, and FedEx decided to assign him to the same route. This is preposterous, but he goes to work and he completes his shift. He's scheduled to work the following day as well, and FedEx again assigns him to the exact same route. Just because he wasn't physically harmed doesn't mean that he didn't suffer incredible emotional and mental trauma. Mr. Gibson is unable to finish his shift as he's suffering from panic attacks, no doubt PTSD, and whatever else happens when you're almost murdered, and for the color of your skin, no less. So FedEx sends him home on unpaid leave. Father and son duo, Gregory and Brandon Case, are not arrested, but are permitted to turn themselves in. 8 days later, the applicable section of the Mississippi Criminal Code reads, "Every person who shall design and endeavor to commit an act which, if accomplished, would constitute an offense of murder, but shall fail therein or shall be prevented from committing the same, shall be guilty of attempted murder." Do you want to know what the cases were charged with? Gregory Case was charged with conspiracy and held on $75,000 bond, and Brandon Case was charged with aggravated assault and held on $150,000 bond. Both men bonded out the same day and did not spend one night in jail. An undated press release from the district attorney's office reads, 2 individuals have been charged with aggravated assault and conspiracy to commit aggravated assault in connection with this case. None of that sounds like attempted murder to me. Finally, almost a year later, the police file is turned over to a Lincoln County grand jury, and both men are indicted and their charges upgraded. On November 18, 2022, the cases are rearrested and indicted for attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, and shooting into the vehicle of D'Monterrio Gibson. In January of 2023, Gibson filed a civil lawsuit against the defendants FedEx, the City of Brookhaven, Police Chief Kenny Collins, and the cases. The lawsuit was, however, dismissed as the judge ruled that Gibson's attorney was unable to prove that FedEx discriminated against Gibson because of his race. Towards the end of July 2023, FedEx fires Gibson via email. FedEx fired Gibson because he did not accept a part-time, non-career job that the company had offered him in mid-July. Gibson says he doesn't feel ready to go back, and they can't tell him when he should be ready. At long last, this matter goes to trial. Opening statements are very brief from both sides. Gregory and Brandon Case each have their own legal representation. Brandon Case's attorney does not provide an opening statement. Have a listen to part of the opening by Gregory Case's attorney, Terrell Stubbs.
As I've said, Mr. Gibson was working for FedEx. He was in a rental van. No one has been told, remember, in the community that, hey, they're rental vans delivering FedEx packages.
Is that somehow supposed to justify the defendant's actions? He says that his client saw a van outside his mother-in-law's unoccupied home and went to check what was happening. Mr. Stubbs emphasizes that it was dark, completely dark. Makes you wonder if you should be shooting a firearm aimlessly in the dark. Wow. Let's continue.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, it was completely dark. Completely dark. And somebody was in the wrong place. It wasn't our clients.
Let's continue.
All Mr. Gibson had to do was just stop and say, hey, I'm a FedEx driver.
Here we go. Victim blaming again, because Gibson should have just stopped, and Gibson should have told them what he was doing there and perhaps provide them with a DNA sample. Like, come on. His blood type? This is absurd. Mr. Gibson did not have to stop. He is not obligated to stop, and he most certainly does not have to obey orders from a white man. On Wednesday, August 16, 2023, Detective Fernando testified that a truck stop security camera recorded a white van being followed by a pickup truck 14 minutes before Gregory Case called the police. Cell phone records show calls between the father and son's phones were made that evening before Gregory Case called the police. A police dispatcher testified that Gregory Case called first, reporting that he had seen a suspicious vehicle near his home and the van almost ran him over. Case said he just wanted to know who owns the van and he thought the driver was up to something that wasn't good. Gibson called shortly thereafter, reporting that someone shot at the van while he was delivering a package. Here's more from Stubbs.
But you did talk to Mr. Gibson, didn't you?
Yes.
So Mr. Gibson is the trespasser. He's the one that's where he's not supposed to be.
Wow. The disrespect is downright ludicrous. Over the course of Fernando's testimony, it is revealed that a statement that was taken from Mr. Gibson was not provided to the prosecution or to the defense. This is a vital piece of evidence. It is highly anticipated that D'Monterrio Gibson would take the stand on the following day, on Thursday, August 16th. And then this happens.
The failure to turn over matters in discovery is just something that can't be ignored. In 17 years, I don't think I've ever seen it happen, but it happened here. And with great reluctance, the court has no choice in this matter but to grant the motion for a mistrial.
Fuck you, God. Hey! Fuck out here.
Well, probably I should have said if you can't control yourself, I usually give people a chance to leave the courtroom if they can't control their emotions. Obviously, one person didn't, and look, I know this is emotional. I can promise you, nobody hates this any worse than I do.
Gibson's attorney, Carlos Moore, says that a mistrial represents not only an administrative setback, but also a delay in justice for Mr. Gibson and his family. The Brookhaven Police Department withheld a potentially crucial piece of evidence, and the withheld evidence necessitated a mistrial. The Department of Justice is closely observing the progress of the state's prosecution while contemplating the possibility of pursuing federal hate crime charges against the cases. From my perspective, there's no question that this incident was racially motivated. Having said that, I am open to differing opinions. If you have an alternate viewpoint, please share it, including the reasoning behind it so I can better grasp your standpoint. I will keep you guys in the loop regarding the next trial date and provide ongoing updates along the way. Big thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, practice kindness and look out for your fellow beings.